In the 1960s, Ghana led the way in African cinema. Its films defined culture. Its actors became stars. And for a moment, Accra was the Hollywood of West Africa. But then came a decline. Piracy, lack of support, and a slow drift into imitation played a major role. Across the border, Nigeria took a different path. Nollywood embraced its own identity in a fast, raw manner, and it worked. Today, Nollywood is a $1 billion industry, while Ghana struggles to reclaim its voice. This is the story of how Nigeria took the crown from Ghana cinema. The story of Ghana cinema begins in the hopeful years after independence. In 1957, Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence, and President Kwame Nkrumah saw that arts, especially film, as a tool of nation building. To him, cinema was more than entertainment. It was education, identity, and propaganda rolled into one. He once declared, "The African personality must be projected, and the African film industry must be our voice to the world." This vision gave birth to the Ghana Film Industry Corporation, or GFIC, located in Accra. It was the first fully state-owned film hub in West Africa, equipped with professional cameras, editing seats, and sound stages. For the first time, Ghana had the capacity to tell its own stories on screens without relying on colonial powers. In the 1960s and 70s, the GFIC produced documentaries, short films, and feature films that traveled across Africa and even to Europe. One of its most beloved titles was I Told You So in 1970, a witty comedy that satirized Ghanaian superstitions and social life. Another milestone came in 1983 with Kokurantumi Road to Accra, which told the story of a rural driver navigating the harsh realities of modern Ghana. These films weren't just entertainment, they were reflections of a nation in transition, caught between tradition and modernity. By the late 1980s, a revolution was underway: VHS technology, a format that allowed movies to be recorded and played on video cassette recorders. No longer confined to cinema halls, Ghanaian films could now be distributed directly into people's homes, cheap to duplicate and easy to sell. VHS tapes made Ghanaian stories accessible to families from Accra to Freetown and from Lagos to London and other countries. Ghanaian markets like Makola and other bustling hubs overflowed with VHS tapes, making film rentals widely accessible. Children hurried home with their rented films. Parents gathered around small box TVs, and neighbors crowded together to laugh, cry, and celebrate their shared culture. It was a golden era for Ghanaian cinema. This era gave rise to iconic stars such as Grace Note, David Donto, Kofi Ajulolu, and many more, who became household names. And by the 1990s and early 2000s, a new wave emerged. Jack Appiah, Majid Michel, Van Vika, Nadia Buari, and many more. Their films did not just dominate Ghana, they traveled across West Africa, turning Accra into what many call the Kumawood of Africa. For a brief, shining moment, Ghana led the way in Africa cinema. But just as Ghana cinema was beginning to show, cracks appeared in the system. One of the biggest challenges was piracy. Producers and directors began to notice something wrong. For every genuine copy, the genuine film sold at least 4 pirated versions circulated in the street. In the early 1990s, it was estimated that almost 80% of all films sold were illegal duplicates. This meant that while audiences were watching the films, the money wasn't reaching the filmmakers. Producers struggled to recover their budgets, and actors often went unpaid or underpaid. For a young industry trying to establish itself, this was devastating. And then came another blow. In 1996, the Ghana government sold off the Ghana Film Industry Corporation, the very backbone of Ghana's cinema stream. It was acquired by a Malaysian consortium and rebranded as TV3. While TV3 became a successful television station, it was no longer a national hub for filmmaking. This left Ghanaia's filmmakers stranded. Without state backing, without proper infrastructure, and without strong copyright enforcement, the industry began to stumble. Meanwhile, the world was moving forward. The global standard for filmmaking was rising. Better cameras, sharper sounds, better budgets. Ghana, however, lagged behind. Low budget productions with outdated equipment could not compete with the polished look of international films. And then Ghanaians noticed and began shifting attention to foreign content, such as Nollywood blockbusters, Bollywood musicals, and even Nigerian films that were starting to appear. Filmmaker Kweku Ansa, one of Ghana's cinema pioneers, once lamented, "We had the talent, we had the stories, but we did not protect the industry." By the late 1990s, the momentum that once made Ghana the leader in African cinema was fading. What started as a cultural revival was now struggling to survive against piracy, poor funding, and lost infrastructure. And just across the border, something extraordinary was happening. As Ghana light dimmed, Nigeria began to shine. A fast movie film movement was taking shape, one that would soon transform into Nollywood, the giants we know today. While Ghana struggled with piracy, dwindling state support, Nigeria was quietly cooking up a revolution. The year was in 1992. In the bustling city of Lagos, a man named Kenneth Nebu produced a film called Living in Bondage. It wasn't shot on film, it was shot on VHS technology, using the same tapes ordinary families used for home recordings. Living in Bondage told the tale of great cult and redemption, a story that resonated deeply with Nigerians. It became a massive hit, selling hundreds of thousands of copies. And just like that, Nollywood was born. Unlike Ghana's state-led model, Nollywood growth was grassroots and entrepreneurial. It wasn't the government funding production. It was traders, business people, even local pastors. They financed films, shot them in just 2 or 3 weeks, and sold them directly in markets. This model worked perfectly for Nigeria's huge population, over 120 million people in the 1990s, which is more than 6 times Ghana's. Even if each film sold only a small fraction of that population, it still meant big money. And the films kept coming. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Nollywood was producing over 1,500 films a year, second only to Bollywood in India. Ghana, by comparison, was producing fewer than 100. These films were not about perfection, they were about volume, accessibility, and relatability. They spoke the language of ordinary Nigerians, reflected their struggles, their humor, their spirituality. Nollywood spread first. Tapes crossed borders into Ghana, Cameroon, Sierra Leone, and beyond. Soon, Nigerians in the diaspora, such as London, New York, Johannesburg, were watching too. Nollywood had tapped into something Ghana had started but could not sustain: a mass, affordable African story machine. By 2009, Nollywood was worth an estimated $250 million annually. A UNESCO report ranked it the second largest film industry in the world by output. Today, Nollywood is valued at over $6.4 billion, employing more than 1 million people across acting, directing, editing, set design, and distribution. And with streaming, Nollywood only grew stronger. Platforms like Yoko TV, DSTV Africa Magic eventually embraced Nollywood content. Films like Lionheart in 2018 and The Wedding Party in 2016 broke records and made Nollywood an international brand. Meanwhile, Ghana, once the giant, was watching from the sideline. Less than 2 decades, Nollywood went from makeshift production on VHS to a global powerhouse. Celebrated on red carpets from Toronto to Cannes, its success was built not on perfection, but on sheer willpower, entrepreneurial drive, and mass appeal. And for Ghana, this was a painful reminder. The crown of African cinema had officially passed to Nigeria. As Nollywood exploded across Africa, many Ghanaian filmmakers began to copy the Nigerian style of storytelling. The accent shifted towards Nigerian English. Plots mirrored Nollywood's melodramas, and even the titles sounded alike. Movies like Princess Tyra and Beyoncé, The President's Daughter, were hits, pulling in audience across West Africa. But despite their commercial success, they weren't truly Ghanaian. They were Ghana's attempt to ride Nollywood's wave. This shift created a crisis of identity. Instead of building on Ghanaia's unique storytelling heritage, its folklore, local languages, and cultural depth, the industry leaned heavily on imitation. Director Safo once admitted, "We're chasing the market, not building an identity. And when you chase, you are always behind." For some, the strategy worked in the short term, but in the long run, Ghanaian cinema lost the very thing that once made it powerful: authenticity. While Nollywood grew stronger by owning its identity raw, fast, unapologetically, Nigerian's Ghana's industry blurred its uniqueness. Trying to copy its neighbor, Ghana forgot its voice. And when you lose identity in arts, you lose power. As Nollywood soared, Ghana's movie industry began to wither. Many of Ghana's brightest stars, such as Jack Appiah, Majid Michel, Van Vika, Yvonne Nelson, started crossing the border into Nigeria. There, they found not only bigger audience, but also better pay. While a Ghanaian film might pay a few $100 for a role, Nollywood offered thousands. For actors trying to build a career, their choice was obvious. And this exodus came at a time when Ghana's infrastructure for filmmaking was collapsing. After GFIC was sold in 1996, there was no central studio system to nurture filmmakers. Producers were left to struggle on their own, often without modern cameras, lighting, or editing suites. Audiences began to notice. By the 2000s, Nollywood films, though still rough, were evolving. Budgets increased, quality increased, and the stories became more ambitious. Ghana, on the other hand, lagged behind. But not all was lost. Out of Kumasi, a new movement rose: Kumawood. Kumawood specialized in low-budget, three-language films that captured the daily life, humor, and struggles of ordinary Ghanaians. They were funny, fast, and relatable in Kumasi and surrounding regions. Kumawood dominated. Some films were shot in less than a week and released straight to DVD. For many Ghanaians, Kumawood kept the flame alive. Its stars like Ajako, Kweku Menu, Lewin became household names. Audiences in rural and urban areas loved them. But Kumawood had limits. Its heavy use of the Twi language made international reach difficult. Its budgets were small, often under $10,000 per film, and piracy was relentless. Movies could be found on the street for less than $1 cedi. Meanwhile, Nollywood had already partnered with DSTV Africa Magic, bringing Nigeria films to millions of homes across the continent. Later, Yoko TV made Nollywood available online to global audience. The contrast was stark. In Ghana, Ghanaian cinema struggled to fill seats. In Lagos, Nollywood premieres sold out stadium. On Netflix, Nollywood had a growing presence. Ghanaian films were nearly absent. By the late 2010s, Ghana annual output had fallen to low. That entire year passed with only a handful of films released. For an industry that once led West Africa, it was painful. Ghana had the history, Ghana had the talent, but without infrastructure, without protection from piracy, and without a global vision, the industry stumbled. While Kumawood kept local audience entertained, the larger dream of Ghana's leading African cinema slipped away. And as Nollywood embraced technology and global platforms, Ghana's voice grew quieter on the world stage. But the story doesn't end with decline because Ghana is fighting for a comeback. In 2019, the government established the National Film Authority, a body tasked with protecting filmmakers, strengthening copyright laws, and positioning Ghanaian cinema for global recognition. For the first time in a decade, there was a clear path to rebrand the industry. And even before that, a new wave of filmmakers had already begun to make noise on the world stage. Take The Burial of Kojo in 2018, directed by Blaise Bazawule, shot on a shoestring budget. It became Ghana's first film to stream on Netflix. The movie was praised internationally for its poetic storytelling and visual beauty. Bliss himself went on to co-direct Beyoncé's Black is King and later The Color Purple, remarked in Hollywood, or Keteke in 2017, a quickie period film by Peter Sedufia, which showcased Ghanaian creativity and humor in a fresh way. These films prove that with vision, Ghanaian stories could still travel. At the same time, young filmmakers are picking up affordably DSLR and smartphone cameras, telling authentic stories and uploading them directly to YouTube and Vimeo. The barriers to entry are lower than ever. International platforms are also opening doors. Netflix has signaled interest in more African production. Festivals across Africa and the diaspora are showcasing Ghanaian shots and dive films. There is also a growing diaspora audience. Ghanaians in the UK, US, and Europe who are hungry for stories from home. With digital distribution, these audiences are easier than ever to reach. And perhaps, most importantly, Ghana's creative energy has never died. From Accra, buzzing its scenes to nurses, unshakable in his spirit. The passion for story remains strong. Ghana's story is not over. The right investment, with privacy kept at bay, and with creativity of a new generation, Ghana can rise again. The story of African cinema is not just Ghana, and it's not just Nigeria. It's the story of an entire continent learning to tell its own stories on its own terms. Ghana rose first, showing that Africa voices could be captured on screens. Then Nollywood exploded, providing the sheer power of entrepreneurship, numbers, and relentless storytelling. Today, Nollywood stands as Africa's cinematic gem, streaming worldwide and generating billions. But Ghana has not disappeared. It has stumbled, yes, but it continues to fight. From Kumasi's tireless Kumawood filmmakers to Accra's new wave of indie directors to the global reach of talents like Blaise Bazawule, Ghana cinema is alive. And maybe just maybe, the next African global blockbuster will come, not from Lagos, not from Hollywood, but from Accra, Lomé, Bujumbura, or any other place across the continent. Because at the heart of it, cinema is not just about who holds the crown, it's about who tells the story. An African story has only just begun. But for Ghana, one question remains unanswered. What really happened to the Ghana Film Industry Corporation? The dream factory that once made Accra the heartbeat of African cinema. Why was it so? And how did TV3's takeover change the destiny of an entire industry? That mystery is the story we will uncover in our next episode. Subscribe and be part of this family.